Hello everybody, my name is Olivia and you're watching Alivia Monroe, and in this video we are going to be talking about a very certain type of parenting that's going around that a lot of people really don't like, and to be completely honest, I understand why. The job of most parents, is to raise their kid, guide them through the first walks of life to the point where, they will grow up to be a better adult than their parents were, and they carry on the legacy in a good light. I think some of the parents of Generation Alpha, which are kids born from 2010 to 2024, wanted to have babies, but not necessarily be parents. Now, if you've been living in Bikini Bottom for the past, 5 years, you might not have heard of this, but iPad babies are pretty much just kids that were thrown whatever piece of technology could keep their focus long enough that the parents didn't have to pay attention to them. You gotta make sure that it doesn't die, they don't lose their charger, it doesn't break, or they will lose their je ne sais quoi shit. It's easy enough, throw the kid a phone, you're practically child-free. Go to the bar, get drunk, go to the club. Who cares? Have another kid. You're not parenting the first one anyway, what's another one? And even if you haven't seen an iPad kid ever since the iPad came out, 10 years ago? Yes, you have, because if you've been out to eat quite literally anywhere, then you've probably seen this sight. Or this sight. First of all, that second baby is literally an infant? Why would you put the knowledge of the entire world and humanity in front of something that can't even drink out of an open cup? I have the knowledge of the entire world in front of me, but here's the difference. Oh, fuck. Now, if you can look past the obvious developmental issues like obesity, anger issues, a lack of any real social skills, iPads aren't really meant for babies in the first place, much less the internet. These kids have to have bright colors and noises, and every single possible fractal of light needs to be bouncing in their eyes at every fucking second. Otherwise, they will get bored. And in fact, neutral colors or muted tones are actually better for development, because neon colors straight into a 1-month-old's eyes probably isn't the best for their fucking retinas. Look at the Minecraft movie. I just recently went to see it and it was straight up nauseating. I get that it's meant for kids, but they don't need a one-liner every 10 seconds or a scene that's 2.5 minutes long. There was no real plot, and there was no callback to anything besides the cube that they had. And I get that kids are into zany and crazy shit nowadays, but they don't need that much stimulation when they're already in a movie theater eating popcorn and candy and pop, which is, sensory stimulation. Also watching just Jack Black go crazy in 69 with Jason Momoa. I don't want to sound like a boomer here, but kids need to be bored. You see videos of it all the time. A mom takes an iPad away from her kid and all of a sudden everything is wrong with them. They're crying, they're screaming, they need to lay down, but they need their iPad because they can't do anything without their iPad. And that's straight up not normal. I never had an iPad as a kid, but when my mom would be like, hey, stop watching SpongeBob and go find something else to do, we have to watch the news now, I would go fuck off and find something else to do. And I think that really helped my development, because I learned how to self-satisfy without melting my brain on Robin from Teen Titans Go shaking ass. It helped my development because if I couldn't find it in myself to give a shit about the latest homicide in Grand Rapids, then I would go read a book or piss off my sister or just reorganize my room, which that is a habit that I wish that I kept. Now, this might not seem important to most, but as someone who thinks children these days are genuinely getting stupider, I have found sources that actually back up most of my claims, and I will put those down in the description, and I'm also going to discuss them as well. Fear not. Firstly, fine motor skills. Fine motor skills are the ability to grasp, manipulate objects, and just pretty much move your hands enough to be able to hold whatever you need to hold. Think about Legos. Think about how easy it is to snap them together exactly where they need to be without misplacing them or your fingers getting tired. Is that easy for you? Yes? No? If no, then you probably have less motor skills than most adults. According to the National Library of Medicine, there's a relationship between the first age of use of digital devices and fine motor skills, and the children who used digital tools earlier on had worse fine motor performance. However, this result cannot be considered significant because it is affected by the age of the children in this relationship. So, younger kid gets an iPad, the worse their fine motor skills are, and vice versa. That already raises some flags, but iPads don't necessarily degrade the muscle usage of the hands in children. It does beg to differ. If children are constantly typing, how are they supposed to learn how to write? In their minds, if all they have to do is use touch screens to do anything, why would they even bother learning good penmanship? I just recently signed a lease for a new apartment, and I didn't even have to sign my name. I just had to type it out. So what good is cursive anymore? I was one of two people, that could sign my name in cursive in my graduating class. If kids these days grow up to never have to actually sign anything, then what good is learning to write at all? You know, if your John Hancock is just a couple tippy taps on a keyboard, why learn to write at all, ever? A lot of kids nowadays will actually write with five fingers, all 5 fingers. And you might ask, oh, how do they do that? They will write like this. Now, you might say, oh, well, they just don't know how to hold a pencil right. Pretend this is a phone, right? And honestly, it makes a lot of sense because I noticed even when I was younger, a lot of girls who got like their first iPod would write like that, and I could never understand it. I was like, how is that comfortable? Because I write like a normal person. I write like this, right? But this? Huh? I asked a friend of mine that has 2 younger siblings that fit the description of iPad kid close enough, and this is how they write their name. Now, I know the study that said that kids exposed to electronics younger are less likely to lack fine motor skills, but the child on top got a phone at 5 and pretty much only uses it for communication like texting and stuff and calling people. And the child on the bottom got a phone at 10 and has been glued to it and video games and YouTube and everything ever since. And for reference, these are the letters that they use to teach children how to write nowadays. And according to a teacher from way down under, a primary school teacher, Carolyn, said that she and her colleagues had noticed a big decline in fine motor skills among children arriving at prep and kindergarten. Carolyn and her colleagues blamed their students' declining dexterity on their use of touchscreen devices such as tablets and smartphones. Children are holding crayons and scissors less and making fewer things with their hands. We've noticed that sometimes, even if you pass a pencil or paintbrush to a child, they're not quite sure how to receive it and how to hold it. This is a huge issue. Even if you don't think it matters because everything's going digital nowadays anyways, let's look at one singular word in that quote. Paintbrush. AI art is already sweeping the world and confusing anybody over 30 on Facebook. And now we're stunting children's growth to the point where there won't be any new art because they physically can't even hold a paintbrush to make more. And if kids can't write and create, there will be no new literature. Novels will be created by an AI that forgets what it's talking about every 5 seconds, and the paintings of Generation Alpha will be made in 5 seconds by, Luna? Ew! Now, art going away might not be the biggest issue because everything's all digital. Whatever, that's fine. But children don't even have playdates anymore. I have seen countless videos of a child's birthday party being all of them watching 1 or 2 kids play a game and then getting extremely pissed off when it's not their turn. You stop. Stop. I'll get the hammer. If you don't start acting right. Hey, that fixed it. I've been to a birthday party like this once before, but the difference was we only really played games when it was like raining outside. Other than that, we were trying to drown each other in the kiddie pools. On top of that, kids don't know how to concede anymore. Somebody always has to win. I babysat 4 of my cousins once, and when one of them beat the other one in Smash Bros, it was like hell let loose. They were begging for rematch, they were yelling, they were crying, and they would not stop until it was time for dinner, in which they couldn't eat until I put a random Roblox YouTuber who was just screaming and yelling on the TV. They couldn't even get hungry unless they were watching something. Let's loop back and think about why that might be. If iPad kids get close to, everything that they want at their fingertips because they have, as we said before, the power and knowledge of the world at their fingertips, they're not ever going to strive to be better at anything, which, takes practice, it takes losing. And how could they possibly know how to lose correctly and be better from it if all that they ever see is somebody getting comically angry every time that they lose at a video game. Let's look back and think about why that might be. If they get everything they want because they have the power and knowledge of the world at their fingertips, they're not striving to be better. They're not doing anything that would take practice and loss, unless it's like Fortnite, because that's healthy for your brain. How could they possibly know how to lose correctly if all that they're seeing is somebody getting comically angry every single time that they lose?
The fuck you say to me, you little shit!
In addition to that, they don't know what it's like to be wrong because they're not getting parented. If you're sat with a tablet in your face all day, you're not doing anything, i.e. you can't do anything wrong. The only thing they might get in trouble for is forgetting to do something, but even then, their parents, having slapped a tablet down in front of their baby's face at 6 months old, never really had to parent their kids in the first place, so I doubt they're gonna take away their lifeline, aka, their iPad, because that's the parent in the relationship. And, that's an entirely different can of worms about, not wanting to parent the children that you brought into the world. And now we circle back to one of my original points, the fact that the internet is simply just not made for kids. And whatever games there were that were meant for only children have died. Back when I was a kid, I would frequent Barbie.com, Nickelodeon.com, Disney.com, all of them. And I remember spending what little time I was allowed on the internet playing games that included characters from my favorite shows. They could come to life on a screen, and that was awesome to me. Now, you look at any of those websites, and there are no games that you can play right then and there, no little clips, nothing. They're just selling everything now. Even under the games tag on Barbie.com, there aren't any games that you can play. You have to buy them and get them shipped to your house first. And think about Club Penguin. That was probably the most child-safe space on the internet because you couldn't even say damn without getting banned. And then Disney bought it, and, they started trying to sell stuff more, and everything had to get paid for, and kids don't have money, kids can't get jobs. Of course the website went under, and what replaced it? Nothing. Okay, so I did actually just look it up, and Nickelodeon.com does in fact have games still, and Girls Go Games is around, so there's 2 websites. And on Girls Go Games, I got a little interested, and there's a game on here called Princess Hard Times, where we see Aurora from Sleeping Beauty pretty sad. And then I got a little scared because the first thing you do after showing obvious depression is grab a pen and paper. I was thinking suicide note, but I hated on it too early because it actually taught you good ways to deal with sadness, like drawing and, eating good food and hanging out with friends. So don't judge a book by its cover. There's no kid space. They're just gonna get shoved into adult spaces and then see adult content. And seeing as porn is already as addictive as cocaine and screens are already addictive, that's just begging for a generation of porn-addicted kids. A friend of mine that I mentioned earlier has a sibling that was asking what thick white liquid was because other kids in her class were talking about it in the 5th grade. I'm not gonna say what I think they were talking about because I think it's pretty easy to deduce, but in my state it's a little bit too early in the year for sex ed, so the only place kids would ever really hear about sexual content like that is the internet. And another issue that does get talked about a lot, but nobody seems to really give a shit, is about the correlation between the lack of child-free spaces and adults grooming children. Now, grooming is when somebody, usually somebody older than the victim, gains the trust of the victim through regular communication. They'll try to find something in common with the victim, and then once they have their trust, they'll coerce them, usually an underage person, into sending nude photos. Just threw up in my mouth a little. Obviously, that is illegal and considered to be soliciting child pornography. The reason that's such a big issue, other than the law, is because of the fact that most companies that make games for kids nowadays, or, websites that include games for kids nowadays, like Roblox, are more concerned with making money rather than keeping their youngest users safe. Robert Locks, I'm looking at you. And some might say that's not their problem. It's the concern of the parents to make sure that their kids are only getting up to good stuff on the internet. But let's look at one of the most popular websites groomers flock to, which is Roblox. Now, notice the comparison between the ages. Notice how the biggest bar on the graph is the 9 years old to 12 years old range. This is because the main comprise of the Roblox game was meant to be games for kids, but it's open code, so obviously adults were going to make games for adults. That means that adults will now be on a website that was once meant for children. That alone makes a game no longer safe, as kids should not be in the same space as adults that they don't know without their parental supervision. And kids who are extremely young, like under 9, aren't gonna know if they're getting groomed until it's too late, and their parents might not see anything wrong if they have a little online friend because they don't know if Tiffany is actually Tyler, who is 45 and lives in Montana. Now, Gen Z kids are watching their little siblings get sucked into the internet like this, and it has caused some major discourse. Most teenagers nowadays talk about once they have kids, they want to get them physical media from their own childhood to raise them because that way they don't ever have to go on the internet, and it's typically less brain rotting. Now, of course, every generation says that there's something ruining the next. For millennials, it was the rise of video games. For Gen X, it was cigarettes and alcohol. I have a friend with a little brother we'll call Kevin. Kevin is the only kid that I've seen with an iPad that actually uses it to better himself. He has math and science games, and not once have I walked past him on his iPad and heard him, some random YouTuber screaming into his ears. He has always been doing something to further his education. Like, you can quiz him on anything chemistry, like the electronegativity of molecules, valence electrons, protons, neutrons, anything. He's stumped me with a couple of his questions. And, I think that's awesome. That's really good for his development, that he's taking it into his own hands to teach himself stuff that he doesn't even need to learn. Mind you, he's like 7, and he's learning all of this stuff on his own, just because he wants to. And that is the good variant of an iPad kid. And so, if you're a kid watching this, which I don't know how you are, this is supposed to be age restricted because my content is not made for kids, be like Kevin. You have a record of everything that has ever happened, every theorem, every single piece of knowledge. Use it to your advantage. I understand that that doesn't sound appealing, but with the way that most of your generation is going to grow up to be a big batch of idiots, even just a little bit more knowledge about just subjects or topics that you're interested in might help you get a job later in life. And with the way that capitalism's going, you're gonna need it. At the end of the day, it's really up to you how you parent your kids. They're not my kids, so do what you will with the information that I've given you today. And I personally won't be giving iPads to my children. They get physical media and books and probably a 3DS until they're about 12 years old. And then they can have their first phone. And after that, when they're like 16, they can get a regular person phone because they're going to be driving, and I'd like to know if they get in a crash or if they're in trouble or something. Anyways, folks, that's really all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't give your children unrestricted internet access. Don't give them the knowledge of the world before they can even walk or drink out of a cup. And more importantly, parent your children. And for those of you that are still here, stick around for my next video in which I will be blowing up every iPad on Earth with a single line of code that I wrote myself.